My stepmother announced she was cutting me from Dad's will at the reading. The lawyer started laughing. The law offices of Sterling and Associates smelled like old leather and older secrets. I sat in the waiting room studying the oil paintings of stern-faced partners while my stepmother Victoria held court with her children Tyler and Autumn, planning their spending sprees with whispered excitement. "First thing I'm doing is buying that Maserati," Tyler announced, scrolling through his phone. "The red one we saw at the dealership in Beverly Hills." "I'm thinking a penthouse in Manhattan," Autumn added, flipping her platinum blonde hair. "Something chic, maybe 40 floors up with a view of Central Park." Victoria patted their hands with her perfectly manicured nails, the same nails that had been digging into my father's fortune for the past 6 years. "Now children, let's not get ahead of ourselves. We'll discuss investments after we handle the formalities." Formalities. That's what she called burying my father and stealing the legacy he built from scratch. I clenched my fists but stayed silent. If there's one thing I learned in the the Ashwood household, it's that speaking too soon only gives Victoria more ammunition. We were ushered into the mahogany-lined conference room. The walls smelled of polish and dust, heavy with the weight of decades of secrets. At the head of the table sat Mr. Alaric Sterling, senior partner of the firm, a man with snowy hair and eyes that had seen too many families devour themselves alive. Victoria glided to her seat like she already owned the building. Tyler and Autumn flanked her, both smirking in my direction as if I were an uninvited guest at my own father's funeral. I sat opposite them, alone. Mr. Sterling adjusted his glasses, opened the thick envelope in front of him, and began. "This is the last will and testament of Jonathan Ashwood." Hearing my father's name spoken in that room made my throat tighten. He wasn't perfect, he was stubborn, prideful, sometimes too strict, but he was my dad. He built Ashwood Holdings with his bare hands and a brain sharper than any blade. And now, all that was left was paper and greed. Victoria leaned forward, already smirking. But then, something happened. Something none of us expected. As per Mr. Ashwood's instructions, Sterling said slowly, his estate, including controlling interest in Ashwood Holdings, real estate holdings, and liquid assets, are to be placed in a trust. Victoria's eyes glimmered. Tyler grinned. Autumn whispered, "Told you." "A trust," Sterling continued, "administered by his daughter, Marissa Ashwood." The room went silent. For a moment I thought I misheard. Me? After years of being treated like the black sheep, after Victoria's relentless campaign to paint me as unstable, unreliable, unworthy, my father left it all to me? Victoria's smile froze. Her manicured hand gripped the arm of her chair so tightly I thought the wood would splinter. "Excuse me," she said, voice dripping poison. "There must be some mistake." Sterling shook his head, lips twitching at the corners like he'd been waiting for this. "No mistake. Your husband was quite clear. The estate belongs to Marissa. You, Mrs. Ashwood, and your children are to receive an allowance, stipend sufficient for comfort, but not control." Tyler slammed his phone down. Autumn gasped. Victoria's face turned the color of raw meat. "This is absurd," she hissed. "Jonathan would never." But Sterling interrupted. "Jonathan Ashwood knew exactly what he was doing. And he left explicit instructions that I read this letter aloud, in this room." He pulled out a second envelope, thinner but sealed with my father's handwriting across the flap. My breath caught. Sterling unfolded the paper and began. "To my wife Victoria, and her children Tyler and Autumn. You came into my life when I was lonely and vulnerable. I tried to give you comfort, security, and a name. But I was not blind. I saw your schemes, your disdain for my daughter, and your obsession with what you believed would one day be yours. Consider this stipend my final act of generosity. My true legacy belongs where it began, with my daughter Marissa. Treat her with the respect you denied her in my lifetime, or risk losing even the allowance I have left you. Signed, Jonathan Ashwood." The silence after those words was thick enough to choke on. I blinked hard, swallowing a sob. my father, he did see. He knew. Victoria shot to her feet. This is a farce. You will not get away with this. But Sterling only leaned back in his chair, unruffled. On the contrary, Mrs. Ashwood. Your husband anticipated this reaction. Every document is notarized, witnessed, and legally ironclad. The estate belongs to Marissa. That is final. And then he did the unthinkable. He laughed. A sharp, genuine laugh, as if he had waited years to watch Victoria's empire of lies collapse in on itself. The sound echoed off the wood-paneled walls, and for the first time in years, I felt like maybe, just maybe, the nightmare was ending. But of course, with Victoria, the nightmare was only beginning. Victoria didn't storm out of the room immediately. That would have been too easy. No, my stepmother was the kind of woman who turned humiliation into strategy within seconds. Her lips curved into the kind of smile that could slice glass. Well, congratulations, Marissa, she purred, her voice dripping venom. It seems Daddy still favored his fragile little girl. But don't celebrate too long. Paper can burn, signatures can be challenged, and courts can be persuaded. Tyler leaned back in his chair, cracking his knuckles. Don't worry, Mom. We'll crush her in court. Money talks, and we've got plenty. Autumn tilted her head at me like a cat studying a mouse. Enjoy your little victory, Marissa. It won't last. I wanted to reply with something cutting, something fierce, but my father's words were still ringing in my ears. My true legacy belongs where it began, with my daughter. For the first time in years, I felt his protection around me like armor. So instead of answering, I gathered my things, stood up, and walked out. As I walked to the parking lot, the old ache of my teenage years resurfaced. Dad had married Victoria when I was 14, barely 2 years after Mom died. Back then, Victoria was all charm, she called me sweetheart, baked cookies, pretended to help me with homework. But slowly, the mask slipped. She started making comments when Dad wasn't around. Your mother spoiled you. You should be grateful I'm here. Your father would fall apart without me. Girls like you never really make it. Be smart and let others take care of things. At family dinners, she always shifted conversations to Tyler and Autumn, praising their grades, their clothes, their talents, while my own achievements were brushed aside. When I got into Stanford, she told everyone I only got in because Dad pulled strings. When I landed my first internship, she called it a pity hire. Dad, too busy expanding Ashwood Holdings, never saw it. Or maybe he chose not to. But the night I overheard Victoria on the phone with her sister, laughing about how she'd lock down the fortune soon enough, I knew she wasn't just cruel, she was calculating. That memory burned in my chest now. She wasn't going to let me keep Dad's legacy without a fight. 2 days later, a sleek black car idled outside my apartment building. I didn't recognize it at first, but when I stepped outside, the tinted window rolled down. Victoria sat inside, immaculate in a cream blazer, diamond studs flashing. Get in, she said flatly. I should have walked away. But curiosity, or maybe defiance, pulled me into the leather seat. She studied me for a moment, then spoke. You think you've won. But you're naive. My lawyers will drag you through the mud until you beg to give up control. They'll call you unstable, irresponsible, unfit to run a company of Ashwood's scale. I'm not giving it up, I said. My voice shook, but I forced myself to hold her gaze. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Everyone has a price, Marissa. What's yours? That's when I realized, she wasn't just angry. She was terrified. Terrified because for the first time, she wasn't in control. I already have my price, I said quietly. It's called justice. I got out before she could answer. The courtroom war begins. Sure enough, within a week, I was served with papers. Petition to contest the last will and testament of Jonathan Ashwood. Victoria was claiming Dad had been manipulated, that I'd exerted undue influence in his final days. The irony almost made me laugh. She was the one who isolated him, screened his calls, and monitored every visitor. But when I walked into the Superior Court for the first hearing, laughter was the last thing on my mind. Victoria's legal team was massive. Polished men and women in tailored suits, flipping through binders like they already owned me. Tyler and Autumn sat smugly behind them, as if the courtroom were their private theater. My own lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Danica Reyes, leaned close and whispered, "Don't let them rattle you. They're going to throw everything at you, rumors, fabrications, innuendo." But Sterling gave us ironclad documents. "Trust me, you're stronger than you think." The judge entered. The hearing began. Victoria's lead attorney launched into a monologue about my history of instability. He waved around doctored social media screenshots, implying I partied too much in college, spent recklessly, dated unsavory characters. Every lie made my stomach churn. But Danica fought back, methodically dismantling their claims. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "the estate plan was updated 3 separate times, each notarized and witnessed. Mr. Ashwood was of sound mind every single time. In fact, he deliberately included language anticipating exactly these kinds of accusations." The judge raised an eyebrow at Victoria's team. Still, I could see how easily narratives could be spun. One wrong move, one misstep, and the court of public opinion, if not the legal one, could be turned against me. Weeks stretched into months. Hearings, depositions, endless paperwork. Then one night, everything shifted. I got a call from Danica at 11 p.m. "Marissa, you're not going to believe this. Tyler just posted a video on his private Instagram. Drunk. Bragging." My stomach flipped. "Bragging about what?" She hesitated, then laughed. "About how you're going to lose. He actually said, and I quote, 'Doesn't matter what Dad wrote. Mom's got the judge in her pocket. We're walking away with it all.'" I froze. He admitted to tampering with the judge? "Maybe not outright," Danica said, "but it's enough to open an ethics inquiry. And guess what? We've got a screen recording." For the first time since the battle began, I let myself smile. Tyler had always been reckless. Maybe that would be his downfall. But the real crack came from Autumn. A month later, Sterling himself called me into his office. When I arrived, Autumn was already there, alone, looking nervous, twirling a diamond bracelet on her wrist. "Why is she here?" I asked coldly. Sterling raised a hand. "She asked to see you. Privately." I hesitated, then sat. Autumn leaned forward, her voice trembling. "I can't do this anymore, Marissa. Mom's insane. She forged Dad's signature on documents years ago, back when she first married him. She said it was just to simplify things, but I saw the papers. She kept copies in a safe at the house." My jaw dropped. "Why are you telling me this now?" Her eyes welled. "Because she doesn't care about me or Tyler. She only cares about herself. And if she wins, she'll cut us out too. I've seen her draft the papers. I didn't know if I could trust her, it could have been a trap." But the desperation in her voice sounded real. Sterling leaned forward. "Do you have proof?" Autumn nodded shakily. "Yes. I can get you the copies." That moment, I realized something. Victoria's empire wasn't just cracking, it was crumbling from within. 2 weeks later, we walked into court with Autumn's evidence. Danica presented it with surgical precision, documents with forged signatures, dates that didn't match Dad's known locations, handwriting analyses. Victoria's face went pale. "Objection," her attorney roared, but the judge was already leaning forward, eyes narrowed. "Mrs. Ashwood, do you care to explain these?" Victoria stood, voice icy calm. "Fabrications. My daughter is confused." But then Autumn, sitting just behind me, spoke up loudly enough for the courtroom to hear. "No, Mom. You did this. I saw you." The entire room gasped. Victoria turned on her daughter with a look so venomous it made my blood run cold. But it was too late. The damage was done. From that day forward, Victoria's case unraveled. The court ordered a forensic audit of all her financial dealings. What surfaced was staggering: hidden accounts in the Cayman Islands, luxury purchases made through shell companies, hush payments to consultants. The judge's patience wore thin. "Mrs. Ashwood," he said finally, "this court finds no evidence of undue influence on the part of Ms. Marissa Ashwood. On the contrary, we find overwhelming evidence of mismanagement and fraud on your part. The will stands as written." I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. But the battle wasn't over. Victoria didn't go quietly. She never did. As court adjourned, she leaned close to me, her perfume cloying, her voice low and venomous. "This isn't the end. You may have won today, but I will burn this family name to the ground before I let you have it." Her threat chilled me more than anything else. Because I knew she meant it. You'd think that after the judge's ruling, I would finally breathe easy. That I could walk out of court, claim Dad's company, and start rebuilding a life free of Victoria's shadow. But I knew better. Victoria wasn't the type to lose gracefully. She thrived on control, and when it slipped through her fingers, she didn't just lash out, she scorched earth. The very next morning, the media storm began. Marissa Ashwood, party girl or company heiress? Fragile daughter inherits billion-dollar empire, is Ashwood Holdings doomed? Friends speak out, Marissa too unstable to lead. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee going cold in my hands, staring at headline after headline. Some outlets had blurry photos of me in college, red cup in hand at a frat party. Others quoted anonymous sources claiming I'd been in rehab. I hadn't. One even claimed I'd been investigated for shoplifting as a teen. Complete fabrication. I didn't need to guess where it came from. Only Victoria had the money, the connections, and the sheer malice to feed tabloids that kind of garbage. Danica called me that afternoon. "Don't panic. These stories burn fast. We'll counter with press releases, highlight your accomplishments, and move forward. But you need to stay calm." Calm. Right. My reputation was being shredded in real time, and she wanted calm. But as I watched the smear machine churn, something inside me hardened. For years, I'd played defense against Victoria. No more. If she wanted war, I'd bring it to her. Ironically, Victoria's carefully crafted smear campaign didn't just hurt me, it exposed cracks in her own family. A week later, I got a late-night text from an unknown number. Just 2 words. "Help me." It was Tyler. Against my better judgment, I met him in a dingy bar outside the city. He was a mess, bloodshot eyes, slurred speech, reeking of whiskey. "She doesn't care about me," he muttered, slamming back another drink. She just wants the money. Always the money." You know what she told me? That if I don't clean up my image, she'll cut me out too. I blinked. "She said that?" He laughed bitterly. "Said I was a liability." Me. Her own son. Can you believe that? I could. I absolutely could. He leaned closer, voice dropping. "I've got stuff on her, Marissa. Documents. Emails. She's been hiding assets for years, tax evasion, offshore accounts. I helped her set some of it up when I was desperate for cash. But now? Now I want out. I want her gone." I studied him carefully. He was drunk, volatile, and probably only half serious. But if even a shred of what he claimed was true, it could be the final nail in Victoria's coffin. "Give me the proof," I said quietly. "And I'll protect you." While Tyler spiraled, Autumn became my unlikely ally. She began meeting me secretly, handing over ledgers, photocopies, even screenshots of Victoria's emails. Each one painted a clearer picture. Victoria hadn't just been greedy, she had been systematically bleeding Dad's company dry for years. "I thought she loved us," Autumn whispered one night, tears in her eyes. But the more I dig, the more I realize, she doesn't love anyone but herself. I put a hand on hers. Then help me stop her. Not just for me, for Dad. For all of us. She nodded, resolve hardening in her gaze. For the first time, I saw my half-sister not as an enemy, but as someone who had been trapped in Victoria's web just as much as I had. Cornered animals are the most dangerous. When Victoria realized the court, the press, and even her own children were slipping beyond her control, she went nuclear. She called an emergency press conference. Cameras flashed as she stood on the steps of Ashwood Holdings headquarters, designer suit impeccable, voice icy. My late husband's so-called will is a fraud, she declared. My stepdaughter manipulated him in his final days, playing on his grief and confusion. And now, she seeks to destroy everything he built. But I will not let her. I will protect Ashwood Holdings from her recklessness, even if it's the last thing I do. The audacity took my breath away. She was reframing herself as the savior, me as the villain. But her performance backfired. Because as she stood there, projecting strength, Danica released Tyler and Autumn's documents to the press. Bank records. Forged signatures. Offshore accounts. By the time Victoria finished her speech, half the reporters' phones were buzzing with alerts. One brave journalist raised his hand. Mrs. Ashwood, care to comment on the Cayman Islands accounts under your name? Or the fraudulent transfers made 2 years before Jonathan Ashwood's death? Victoria froze. For the first time in public, she faltered. The cameras caught it. And once that footage aired, her image, her carefully polished, decades-old mask, shattered. Days later, I got a call. Victoria wanted to see me. Alone. Against Danica's advice, I agreed. I needed closure. She chose the Ashwood estate for our meeting. The house where I grew up, where Mom's laughter once echoed, where Dad's voice once made everything safe. When I entered, Victoria was sitting by the grand fireplace, drink in hand. The room smelled faintly of expensive perfume and desperation. You think you've won, she said flatly. I didn't think, I replied. I fought. And I did. She laughed bitterly. You're your father's daughter, I'll give you that. Stubborn. Righteous. But tell me. Do you really think you're ready to lead? To shoulder an empire? The board will eat you alive. The shareholders will turn on you. You'll drown, Marissa. Maybe, I admitted. But at least I'll drown honest. You would have sunk us all with your lies. Her eyes burned into mine. For a moment, I thought she I thought she might throw the glass at me. Instead, she downed it in one gulp. You'll regret this, she whispered. Mark my words. Ashwood Holdings will destroy you. I turned toward the door. No, Victoria. You destroyed yourself. I left her there, in that cavernous house, surrounded by luxury but utterly alone. It didn't take long. Federal investigators opened probes into her finances. The IRS came knocking. Her accounts were frozen, her assets seized. Headlines that once praised her beauty and elegance now screamed of fraud, deceit, and betrayal. Tyler checked himself into rehab. Autumn cut ties completely, moving across the country to start fresh. And Victoria? She disappeared from public life, her empire of lies reduced to ashes. Some said she fled overseas. Others whispered she lived quietly in some small town, stripped of her wealth, her pride, her power. For me, it didn't matter. She was gone. And for the first time I was free. But freedom came with responsibility. The day I officially took the CEO seat at Ashwood Holdings, I sat in Dad's old chair, staring at the city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The boardroom was filled with skeptical faces. Some doubted me. Some resented me. Some waited for me to fail. I cleared my throat. I won't pretend I have all the answers. But I know what my father built. And I know he believed in me. That's enough to start. Silence hung heavy. Then one board member, a man who'd served under Dad for 20 years, nodded. Jonathan would be proud, he said softly. And just like that, the tide shifted. Months passed. The company stabilized. Profits rose. Slowly, people stopped seeing me as the fragile daughter and started seeing me as a leader. But it wasn't about the money. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about reclaiming my place. About honoring Dad's legacy. About proving to Victoria, to the world, to myself that I was more than the scared girl she'd tried to break. One evening, I returned to the Ashwood estate. I walked through the halls, now quiet, stripped of Victoria's presence. In Dad's study, I found a photo of us, me as a child, perched on his knee, both of us smiling wide. I framed it on the desk where he used to sit. For a moment, I closed my eyes and whispered, "I did it, Dad. We did it." And for the first time in years, I felt peace. Because in the end, Victoria was right about one thing. Ashwood Holdings could have destroyed me. But instead, I rebuilt it. I rebuilt myself. And that is the true legacy my father left behind. And that's how the truth came out, and Victoria's empire crumbled. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more.